Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. Hugh Freeze, the Auburn Tigers, working their way through spring practice, kind of wrapping up this weekend at 8A, which it kind of sounds like just an open practice for the Auburn fans to go and check out. There are a lot of takeaways that we can kind of grab from Auburn during spring practice, and I think it starts up top at the quarterback position, where it's a really interesting conversation where you're hearing good things from Jackson Arnold. You're kind of hearing even better things from freshman Deuce Knight. And Dill, that kind of surprises me a little bit, because how do we talk about Deuce Knight coming into Auburn? An immensely talented kid that probably needs a year of development. Well, it sounds like that year of development might not necessarily be needed. And that's not me getting up here and saying Deuce Knight's going to be quarterback one in 2025, but it sounds like that's a little bit more of a real conversation than I thought it was going to be 4 weeks ago. Want to start at the quarterback position, kind of work our way down nitty gritty about this Auburn roster. I want to start with this still. This Auburn roster going into 2025, it has the prerequisite talent to get its foot in the door. You know, in the SEC, and Auburn fans know this more than anybody, especially having Brian Harsin as your head coach before Hugh Freeze. It doesn't matter how good you are as a coach. Like, if you don't have the prerequisite talent to compete at the highest level of the SEC, you just ain't. And I feel like Hugh Freeze, you look at where this roster was when he took over in 2023, and now where it is in 2024-5, where I'm looking at it and saying it's a complete team that has legitimate star talent. Look, I know Auburn fans have been frustrated with what it sometimes looked like on the field, and this feels like a big year in 2025. My overall take is they got the talent to do some things in the 2025 year. Now it's just got to come together. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Auburn fans, we can't thank you guys enough. It's been a blast talking the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn, breaking down the commitments, breaking down the transfer portal additions. Appreciate you guys more than y'all know. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Kind of excited to break down what we hear from Saturday afternoon. Dill, I want to give you the T-box here. Quarterback battle. Jackson Arnold, Deuce Knight. I said this earlier this week. I kind of like the thin quarterback room. Without Ashton Daniels on campus, you are really pouring into Jackson Arnold and Deuce Knight, where, go back to last year, go back to 2023, you had so many cooks in the kitchen at the quarterback spot. Nobody really had the opportunity to get a ton of reps and take command of the offense. Deuce Knight and Jackson Arnold had that opportunity, and it sounds like it's working out well for Auburn at the quarterback spot here.
And that might be the most interesting storyline, is that does feel like more of a legit battle than I would have thought coming into this spring. I was like, okay, I kind of get it. Deuce Knight will probably sit this year, learn behind Jackson Arnold, and then the battle really kind of takes shape, let's say, assuming Jackson Arnold's back for his senior year. So the fact that that's a legitimate battle right now, I think, one, is important, because obviously the depth of that quarterback room got thinned out pretty good with Walker White leaving. In the rest of the crew, essentially, in that quarterback room.
That's
at least you have competition, but I am fascinated by the fact that it's
so you're right. The competition's intriguing, but I think you make a really excellent point too. Like, knowing that Deuce Knight has the ability to play, and it's not necessarily him winning the job, but knowing that, hey, if he has to come in and run this offense, he sounds like he can do it pretty well in terms of a depth conversation. Because again, 4 weeks ago, I probably thought Deuce Knight was probably not going to play in 2025. You probably didn't want him playing a ton. Well, it sounds like that's not necessarily the case. So from a depth standpoint too, you're kind of fired up about what you're hearing. And Dill, this is what excites me the most about Auburn here. You got 2 5-star quarterbacks, 2 guys that we know have some elite traits, especially a guy like Deuce Knight. Well, they're going to be surrounded by what I think is not only arguably the most talented wide receiver room in the country, it's probably the deepest too, Dill. And during this open practice that we get Saturday afternoon, I am most excited to get a feel for, hey, what's the wide receiver rotation looking like? And kind of who are the guys that are going to emerge as the names we want to get most involved? Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton are the top 2. Who's 3, who's 4, who's 5 is probably what I'm most excited to hear coming out Saturday afternoon.
And I'm interested to hear what the wideouts are. Again, like, I kind of take that for granted almost. Like, I know they're going to put out 4 or 5 really good wide receivers this year. My fascinating point will be what they do at the tight end spot, because obviously last year they had Rivaldo Fairweather. He was on the field for pretty much every offensive snap. It felt
Yep.
like for all intents and purposes. This year, I don't know who you're looking at tight end being like, this guy needs to be on the field. So that's kind of what I think I'm looking for as like the spring practice winds down and people finally get to see for themselves what Auburn's going to do. I want to see what this offense looks like and like, is it going to be a tight end rotation
Well,
or it's going to play for a while?
that's funny you mentioned that. We talked about that a little bit earlier this week. Dill, sometimes I feel like we overcomplicate the game of football. And like I know tight ends are important to certain schematics of the offense, but want to know what else is important is getting your best players on the football field. And I look at who are your best players on offense going into 2025. It's the wide receiver room, especially the buzz we're hearing about Perry Thompson or a guy like Sam Turner who's going to be a true freshman. These guys are impact dudes, and they got a lot of diverse skill sets. I am like you, very excited to say, hey, not sure if we have a difference maker in the tight end room. Maybe we lean into some more 4 wide receiver sets where we're trying to maximize the talent on the field. Until I look at him, you tried out Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons. What defense is dealing with all those athletes out there running around in space?
Because even the run scheme, like, is that going to be an overly like pound it in your face kind of run scheme? It's like I even look at the running backs; they are a little bit more like you don't necessarily have your Jarquez Hunter. I feel like a guy who you really want to be banging on the inside, like Damari Alston, a little bit more athletic maybe. So I wonder, like, even losing that much, that's going to be kind of an interesting personnel thing. Unless one of these tight ends has stepped up and is a lot better than maybe
but even if the tight end room is solid, it's like, is it more solid than the 4th, 5th wide receiver on this roster? No, probably not. And so I very intrigued in terms of what the schematics are of the wide receiver room, because I look at it and say I want to get these kids on the football field. Perry Thompson intrigues me the most. It sounds like he's taken that step. We said it earlier this week. He's a guy that was not here last year at this time. He was a summer enrollee. Was a raw wide receiver with not a super diverse route tree as a freshman. Was kind of hard to get on the football field, even though he was really talented. Well, it sounds like he can do a little bit more, has a little bit more polish to his game. Look, I mean, Cam Coleman's that guy. I don't think Perry Thompson's that far below what Cam Coleman brings to the table. Offensive line combination, Dill, because you got a lot of versatility here. This is, again, you talk about the Hugh Freeze impact. He spent a lot of time, recruiting the offensive line, using the portal to supplement it. It's a deep offensive line. It's a veteran offensive line. You got a couple of guys who've been playing college ball for 5-6 years. What's that combination look like specifically at right tackle? I know Xavier Chaplin, working back from injury, won't be participating in spring or hasn't participated in spring. Dill, we said this when Mason Murphy committed to Auburn. Right tackle was a little bit of a roller coaster for him at USC, a guy that you probably trust playing right tackle, but could be a better guard. There's a lot of versatility. Mason Murphy, guy like Dylan Wade. I am interested to see what kind of offensive line combinations they are deploying as they search for, hey, what's our best starting 5 going into 2025? Because I feel like it should be a pretty dang solid starting 5 for Auburn in 2025.
And that's not one we've really gotten a great answer from. I don't feel like when I read kind of the beat reporters, it's like you hear them. Yeah, Mason Murphy's kind of battling Xavier Miller, and it sounds like both are playing pretty well. And frankly, both might play either at guard, one of those two at guard, one of them at right tackle. So that is one of those ones you wonder, like, I do think Auburn does have the tools to be a really good offensive line, probably for the first time in Hugh Freeze's era. Like, they were a solid offensive line. I'm not trying to like say they were a liability last year, but it certainly wasn't a strength of that team. This year, again, with all the continuity back, the supplementation from the transfer portal, especially at that left tackle spot that you just weren't getting good enough play at. Yeah, this offensive line, I'm very interested to see because it should be a really, really good unit, I think.
Continuity and depth. It's something that not a lot of teams have on the offensive line. Auburn kind of has it. Like, a lot of these guys, I know they've added 2 guys in the portal. And the 2 guys they added in the portal are veteran guys that have started multiple years at the Power 4 level. But then it's just a lot of guys that have been in that room for a little bit.
And it's not like you saw them push good, like Dylan Wade didn't leave, or Xavier Miller didn't leave, or Jeremiah Wright didn't leave. Like, yeah, they added some pieces, but it's not like you ran off a ton. Like, you kept the ball here. Like, Perry Thompson, or the big dude, obviously, at left tackle. I'm getting his name.
Percy Lewis.
Like, yeah, okay, fine. He left. He was obviously not going to make it happen at Auburn. So it's like again, you kept the bulk of that team and you added a really good piece at left tackle and kind of an interesting one in Mason Murphy.
Here's the question that I don't know if we'll get fully answered on Saturday, but you're starting to hear the buzz coming out of spring practice. And I would say outside of the quarterback position might be the most intriguing and important position for this Auburn football team is the defensive line, which has sneaky Dill was really good for Auburn in 2024. Like nobody talked about it because there were some other things going on with this Auburn team that were probably more noteworthy, aka the turnovers. This defensive line, top 20 in the country stopping the run, top 30 in pass rush. It should be very good in 2025. My question is how good, and I look at it and say that answer lies in the year one, year two defensive lineman. This is something we've quietly talked a lot about in the summer. Hugh Freeze has invested a lot of time and resources recruiting blue chip talent on the defensive line. Look, we know Keldrick Faulk's that guy. He's one of the most underrated players in the country. Amaris Williams going into year two. You're hearing all the right things in spring practice. Can that happen in 2025? You've heard great things from Kieran Crawford year two. I know he's not young, but you've heard some really good things from him. Then you look at a guy like Jordan Crawford, Dill. Like, can Jordan Crawford not only be a depth piece for Auburn, but it sounds like he could be kind of an impact guy in the middle of that defensive line. Same thing for Malik Autry. I throw in Jared Smith in that conversation as well, who I thought, similar to Deuce Knight, thought he was going to be a little bit of a project, thought he was going to be a year two, year three guy. Sounds like he might be a little bit of a year one guy. And we know the upside on him is astronomical. The year one, year two defensive linemen, the pass rushers, that to me has a large part in terms of like, hey, just how good is this Auburn team going to be in the 2025 year?
That probably is the biggest question. And maybe you could argue linebacker too. Those are probably my two questions. Are they good enough at linebacker? DeMarcus Riddick can play, obviously, but like who's going to run with them? And then obviously, yeah, you need Malik Autry, Jordan Crawford, or someone, one of those young defensive tackles to be a quality depth piece at the minimum.
But like that's changed a little bit for me in terms of how I'm like, look, now I know Jordan Crawford's going to be a quality depth piece. Now it's like, all right, how good can this kid be as a freshman? And Malik Blockton, like, I feel like nobody talks about him.
People don't talk about him. He was dominant last year.
I don't know. I mean, that's that might be a little over your skis, but Dill, he was very. All right. He was a freshman last year, true freshman in the SEC. You were what, playing 285 soaking wet, right? No way he was over 290. He's up to 305, legit
Disruptive.
305.
That's the thing. Like, you see a legitimate playmaker from him. Yeah, there were some times where double teams got on him a little bit, but like in terms of being a disruptor from the middle, and that's not something we were getting enough of from Auburn, frankly, for the first couple of years of Hugh Freeze's tenure. You finally had one in Malik Blockton, and now that he's kind of filled himself out, like I'd expect a really good year.
Yeah, I do too. Very high in him. You kind of mentioned this, like, to me, it's like, do we have enough linebackers we trust is probably the best way I phrase this. You know what I mean? Like, I like the athletic profiles, especially a guy like DeMarcus Riddick. I'll say this, Elijah Melendez, the true freshman, generating a little buzz, big time juice from an athletic profile standpoint. The linebacker room looks the part athletically, body type wise. Now, do we have enough guys that we trust to play football first in 2025? And it's not like we need first team All-American play, but it's like, hey, we got to tackle in space. We got to fit the run the right way. We have to know what we're doing. Do we have enough of those guys that we trust? And you got to answer that. And if it's not, hey, we got to go add one more in the portal. And we'll kind of see where Auburn sits after they wrap up spring. And then, Dill, secondly, this secondary is going to be awesome.
We know this is be great.
You have so many good problems where it's just like, how do we, similar to the wide receiver room, it's like the same exact conversation. How do we get them all how do we get them all on the field? Like, you can be creative because you do have some creative kind of guys or some versatile guys. Look, Jay Crawford can play. And what if he takes a year two step? I don't think that's crazy. Caleb Harris, year two step as safety. You bring in Rayon Strader. You've heard him adapt very well to SEC play. Kayan Lee, sneaky, like, would start on 90% of teams across college football. You have a couple of true freshmen that sound to be making some noise. Blake Woodby at nickel, Eric Winters and Anquan Fagans at the safety spot. Again, very similar to the wide receiver and say, how do we maximize this unit? And that probably is the best way to wrap this up, though. Last year in 2023, you had some legitimate questions where like, hey, are we good enough at certain positions? That conversation now is like, how do we maximize this roster? You know, how do we go from good to great? And I do think that's the legit conversation you're having with Auburn. Again, there's a wide variety of outcomes that you could see for Auburn in 2025. We've been saying that all year. I still believe it. But that upside is a lot higher than I think a lot of people appreciate. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Going to be really fun hearing all the feedback we get out of Saturday afternoon. Talk to y'all later. Peace.